Welcome, everyone. Come on in, have a seat as quickly as possible. Come on in, have a seat. Join us here. Wow, what a blessing it is to be together on Shavuot. Welcome, everyone. Welcome. What a blessing it is to be together, especially in this difficult time. And we are blessed to hear tonight from the incomparable Barry Shrage. Barry, yes, applause. That was an applause line. Barry led our community through years of challenges and triumphs, and we invited him here tonight to share his reflections and his words of chizuk for us today. Barry Shrage.
Scary. It's a full house. I'm out of practice. Um, with the permission of the rabbis and the permission of the congregation, it's great to be here and to speak. And it's great to be here at Temple Emmanuel because Temple Emmanuel is a great example. Temple Emmanuel. Temple Emmanuel is a great example of why synagogues will live and survive and flourish, and why the people who express doom are absolutely wrong. And there's a reason for it. There's a reason for it. You've got great rabbis who are great teachers. You've got great volunteer leaders, and you've got a sense of community that really, I mean, isn't that kind of like we're here 25% to study Torah, 75% really to be with each other. And while it was important to be with each other, we would have done this 3 weeks ago or a month ago or 2 months ago. Now it's really important to be together. Now we our loneliness is you can feel it. It's palpable. And our ability to survive really depends on our being together. Not just us together here, but also in Israel, which is sort of like the theme that I'm going to be talking about. It's like, really, what does this mean to be a Jew? What does that mean? I mean, we're all talking about it in lots of different ways. And one of the most, pernicious ideas that has emerged in recent days from the uh, brilliant insights of people like Peter Beinart is the idea of diasporism. In other words, that we really are better off without Israel, that we can seek and find spirituality in our own, small homes, that we can ignore the world, that we can ignore the pain of our brothers and sisters, that uh, that we can ignore the pain of our brothers and sisters. It's like we could take, the blue pill and be anesthetized and not feel the pain that's around us. And it's kind of like that I want to talk about, and why, in a way, for a Jew, that's impossible. It's just not possible, and it's related, I think it's related to our journey to Sinai. According to our tradition, God revealed himself to the Jewish people at Sinai on Shavuot. Shavuot marks the giving of the Torah, the moment that God revealed himself to the Hebrews, the spiritual birth of the Jewish people, and the ultimate spiritual experience. At that moment, we were lifted out of ourselves as human beings and perceived ourselves to be part of something much greater. For those who seek God, it was the essence of what we mean by the word spiritual. I mean, isn't that it's sort of, the mountain shakes, and the presence of God is on the mountain, and you can almost actually feel the presence of God in all of that activity. Of course, our other tradition is that we experience God in the still small voice, which is kind of the way I do, but and many of us do, I think. But there's also this, that there's something incredibly strong that we feel and that we experience. But this was also the moment that God revealed himself most directly to Moshe. The experience that Moshe was seeking since he left Egypt for Midian, Moshe's ultimate spiritual experience. But what was that? I mean, who was Moshe? What made him a great Jewish leader? What was the message, the content of his leadership? According to the Rav, the late Rabbi Joseph Soloveitchik, Moshe spent many years, throughout the 60 years in Midian, in, quote, a state of lassitude, exhaustion, and despair. He had no message. Only God compelled him to become the Redeemer, the Moshiach. Am I doing something wrong here? Can't I just stand in the middle of the room and yell? How many Jews does it take? I never had this trouble before at CJP because I had like 12 people to make sure it didn't happen. According to the Rav, Moshe only understood the whole of Jewish destiny, why slavery was necessary, why the people had to spend hundreds of years in Egypt and then to be taken out of the land of bondage. At Har Sinai, when the Torah was given, Moshe understood. So what did he understand? What happened at Mount Sinai between Moshe and God? What did Moshe understand? What spiritual heights had Moshe attained that allowed God to reveal himself to him? And what does it teach us about spiritual seeking and about our relationship to the Jewish people in these times? And I think that the answer is, in a way, surprising. Moshe begins his life as a person of mixed identity, not quite Jewish, not quite Egyptian. A Jew raised as an Egyptian who discovers his relationship to the Jewish people late in life. This is not uncommon in these days, not uncommon. A prince in the government of the mightiest and most oppressive empire on earth, and a descendant of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, who defined themselves through kindness and hospitality, and whose God demanded kindness to strangers. How does he find himself? Who is he? His identity, like the identity of so many Jews today, was confused, and yet he was a person of vision and integrity, a person who cared deeply about the world and his place in it, and so Moshe grew up in the palace of Pharaoh. He was insulated from the world and isolated from the suffering of his people. Within the palace, the world seemed good and just. But one day he leaves the palace, expecting to find a world of peace and harmony and justice. But instead, he finds a world filled with degradation and slavery and death for his own people. He sees an Egyptian striking a Hebrew, and we all know he kills the Egyptian. The next day, he leaves the palace again and sees two Jews fighting, and he tries to stop them, but they respond with hostility. Imagine Jews responding with hostility. Actually, to tell the truth, people often say it's difficult to work in the Jewish community, and you know what? It wasn't. People were actually pretty much in Boston, in our community, kind to each other and caring about the community, and Rabbi, they treat us well. They treat the professionals with kindness and caring. In my case, more than I deserve. Anyway, the people respond. They say, "Who appointed you as a dignitary, a ruler, and judge over us?" That only happened 6 or 7 times to me during my 31 years here. "Do you propose to kill me as you killed the Egyptian?" Moshe, realizing that he is in danger, flees to Midian. But this story has another interpretation, taught by Rabbi Moshe Lichtenstein, Rav Soloveitchik's grandson, in his book, Moshe, Envoy of God, Envoy of His People. Highly recommend. He suggests that the murder of the Egyptian is not simply a spontaneous act of anger and murder, but rather a conscious act of rebellion by Moshe. He is not simply angry at the Egyptian for being a Jew. He is angry at a system that allows brutality and slavery. He is committed to ending the system through a slave revolt that will end the Egyptian regime and free the Hebrew slaves. He intends the killing of the Egyptian to show that the Egyptians are not gods, that they are vulnerable, and he hopes that this knowledge will spark a massive rebellion. The next day, when Moshe goes out again, he finds 2 Jews fighting with each other. But according to Rav Lichtenstein, this is far more than a fight between 2 Hebrews. It is part of a massive debate that has already broken out among the Hebrew slaves. The Hebrews have already divided into 2 factions. The pro-Moshe faction wants to start the rebellion immediately and fight the Egyptians, but the anti-Moshe faction is afraid that rebellion will lead to the complete destruction of the Jewish people. This is the same debate that has taken place countless times among our people, from the slave pits of Egypt to the battle with the Babylonians, to the war against the Greeks, to the fight against the Romans, to the Warsaw Ghetto, to the streets of Tel Aviv and Jerusalem less than a year ago. Rabbi Lichtenstein suggests that Moshe is not upset by the debate. A community should never make life or death decisions without full debate. But Moshe is shocked that rather than having a civil debate, the Jews are literally beating each other to death over the question of whether to rebel or not. It also sounds familiar. This is a familiar story from 70 AD, when Jews were killing each other while the Romans were sharpening their swords and building their siege works, to 2023, when Jews were demonizing each other, and near to civil war because Israeli leaders used ugly rhetoric to demonize their rivals and divide Israeli society for political gain, while again, a barbaric enemy prepared for invasion, murder, rape, and slaughter. Moshe, in his disappointment, turns away from his vision of a slave rebellion against Pharaoh, gives up hope for change, loses faith in his people and in humankind, and in frustration, turns to a purely spiritual search. Moshe flees to Midian, not simply to escape Pharaoh's punishment, but to find a spiritual mentor in Yitro, apparently known as the most spiritual person in the world, his future father-in-law, and to seek God in the desert and mountains of Sinai. And so for the next 60 years, Moshe searches and seeks God along with his mentor, Yisro, without success. Somehow, his goal of understanding God eludes him. Moshe never finds God after 60 years, but God finds Moshe and sends him back to Egypt to free his people. And throughout the process of liberation, and this is kind of incredible when you know that Moshe keeps saying, who are you, God? I don't even know if you exist. What are you? Show me who you are. And don't you ask yourself sometimes, like, are you kidding? Are you kidding? What were the plagues? You know, I mean, how much more apparent? What was the splitting of the seas? What was every miracle that was done? And how do you not know what God is by seeing all these things? But and even at Mount Sinai, he hears the voice of God, but is still seeking a truly spiritual experience, the possibility of seeing God, experiencing God, and understanding God to the fullest. All this eludes Moshe throughout the process of liberation. So what brings him to a full understanding of God? To the moment when God reveals his glory to Moshe. According to Rabbi Lichtenstein, Moshe only finds God after showing his willingness to make the ultimate sacrifice for his people. After the sin of the golden calf, God makes Moshe an offer he can't refuse. Good quote. What's it from, everybody? Moshe. But Moshe refuses. The Lord further said to Moshe, I see that this is a stubborn people. Now let me be, that my anger may blaze forth against them, that I may destroy them and make you a great nation. But Moshe implored the Lord his God, saying, let not your anger, O Lord, blaze against your people, whom you delivered from the land of Egypt with great power and with mighty hands. Now, if you will forgive their sin, well and good. But if not, erase me from the record which you have written. Rabbi Lichtenstein comments, Moshe is not only risking his achievement and his worldly existence, he is endangering his legacy to future generations and perhaps even his share in the world to come. Moshe's very existence and being are dependent on the survival of the people, and he rejects any option that will part him from them and their fate. Moshe is prepared to sacrifice himself to save his people. Only after showing his commitment to his people does God reveal himself in all his glory to Moshe. And the Lord said to Moshe, I will also do this thing that you have asked, for you have truly gained my favor, and I have singled you out by name. Moshe said, oh, let me behold your presence. And God answered, I will make all my goodness pass before you, and I will proclaim before you the name of Hashem, and the grace that I grant, and the compassion that I show. So what does this teach us today? What does this mean for us, for our spiritual seeking, for what we care about, and for what we feel we must do, especially right now? If you think about it, this idea that we need to love our people even at the risk of our lives. Now, loving our people even at the risk of our lives, apparently, Israelis understand this full well. And apparently, many of us and many of the people in our next generation don't really understand that that's the path to salvation and to spirituality. You can try to find spirituality many different ways, but in essence, they're telling you that to be spiritual and good, you have to reject your people. Not only that, but they're humiliated. They're castigated for their feelings. To be able to experience Jewish pride in these times is difficult. And to be able to stand up in a crowded room, which many people seem to not be able to do, and simply say, I am a Jew. I am a Zionist. I love my people. Everyone on this campus loves their people. They can express pride. We are not able to express pride. In a way, it reminds me of, because I'm very old, it reminds me of the late 60s. You know, it's interesting that sort of the 50s was a period of massive assimilation for American Jews. And we didn't even think it was a bad thing. It wasn't a bad thing. I mean, it was our parents' greatest hope that we would all get great educations and succeed in America and go to Columbia University, God forbid, and all the rest of that. It was only really after the 6-Day War, and actually in relation, in a way, to the Black Power movement, that we understood that in America, all of a sudden, it's okay to be Black. It's okay to be gay. It's okay to have a different kind. You don't have to be, a white, blonde-haired, blue-eyed American in order to feel good about yourself. And that was the message, and it succeeded very, very, very well, I think. I think it was after the 6-Day War that we found pride in being Jewish in America, and we were able to live this golden age, really, the last 50 years, being able to have all those things. But those things have changed, and we all know it, and it's changed radically and very much for the worse. We try to figure out, what does that mean? What do we tell our kids? What do they do? What does it mean about our relationship with Israel and Zionism? On many campuses and in the streets, our children are being urged to abandon our people, to leave them to their destruction at the moment of greatest danger. Many Jews are physically threatened or threatened with cancellation, or pressed to publicly declare their hatred for their own people, and insanely, their allyship with a terrorist movement that is profoundly anti-Semitic, anti-human, sexist, homophobic, and guilty of unimaginable crimes against the Jewish people, Palestinians, and humanity. So I think it's hard for this to kind of get through our heads. I mean, how is this possible? On Israeli television, there are jokes about this. You've all seen the little cartoon that shows a picture of chickens, and it's like chickens for Colonel Sanders. It's like, really? I mean, we're really going to ally ourselves with people who want us dead? And in that, it's sort of like how we get out of this and how we encourage our kids. There's a part of this movement on campuses is to offer Jewish kids the same protections that other people have, other groups have, and indeed, I think that they deserve that protection. But to tell you the truth, I'm not happy about that. I'd rather they have courage than they have protection. I'd rather them be able to stand up for themselves than seek the same stupid protections that other people are, and safe spaces that other people are asking for. And in a way, if you think about it, how closely aligned this is with what the situation is in Israel, you'd see that, look, on October 6th, Israel was deeply divided. Nobody seemed to be close to anyone else. We were completely unprepared. We told our enemies that we're going to be soft, that we're going to be unprepared, that we're going to be unready. And in fact, we were in many ways. But the minute the war started, it turns out there was a book called The Genius of Israel, which I love. It's a great book. And it basically says that, in truth, Israel, its strength is its love for each other. Its strength is its genius, is its resilience. And we didn't see that during the whole period of the judicial reform debate, but we saw it in 30 seconds the minute the war started. Not only that, I was in Israel first time in 1971. And in 1971, I was visiting family in Haifa, and everyone said, it really worried me because I was working with teenagers in the United States at that time, and they said, we're really worried. Our teenagers are learning from your teenagers. They're getting soft. Every generation is getting less and less able to fight, more and more into your games and more into your seeking middle-class status and wealth. And And year by year, it seemed that that idea got worse and worse and worse. So what happened? What happened that they turned into tigers all of a sudden? That they were up against these so-called hard guys that were supposed to defeat them in 30 seconds? Everybody said. Their courage is something incredible. Mika Goodman calls it one of the miracles of this experience, is just how brave they were and what they were able to accomplish. I think we need to send our kids we need to re-up with Birthright and with every other experience that brings kids to Israel. We got to do it fast because they need a transference of courage. They need to feel that for themselves. So I'm talking to people. I was talking to a guy, actually an Israeli who's working in an American group, actually at JDC with Entwine. He's a great guy, and he's an Israeli, and he was back there 3 times in the tunnels already. And he said, and I said, we got to really switch Entwine from the rest of the world to sending as many kids as we can to Israel. And he said, we'd love to do that, but they're tired of this fight. The American kids, they're tired of it. And they feel like under stress and under pressure. I sound like, it's true. It's something to be concerned about. Every parent needs to be concerned. But I said to the guy, I said, tell them that there are other people that are getting shot at. It's not just stress. People aren't just saying from the river to the sea. They're like trying to kill us. And perhaps we need to pick up a little courage from the people on the other side. It's possible. It's possible that we need to reaffirm our feeling of pride in Israel. What I'm saying is there is no possibility of synagogues or spirituality or anything if we can't love our people enough to want to defend them at a time when their lives are in danger. There's no hope for us without that. And that's why we need to be so strong and to be so clear about it. So like in a way, when we are asked by our enemies and they say to us, all you got to do is abandon your people and you'll be great. Like God says to Moshe, just let me kill them and you'll be great. And if the world says to us, just leave us alone, let us kill off Israel, let's destroy the country, and America will be great for you. This is not going to happen that way. America will not be great for us if Israel doesn't exist. It's hard enough right now with Israel existing. Although I still have faith in America, and I still believe it can be a great place for us. But we need to be able to answer that. What do we say when they ask us those questions? So I think we need to answer in a number of different ways. We need to tell the people who are urging diasporism upon us that we will stay loyal to our people. I think we need to answer as Queen Esther did when she says, I will go to the king even though it is against the law, and if I perish, I perish. We need that level of courage because our brothers and sisters in Israel are exhibiting exactly that level of courage. But I'll end with the words of the Columbia Jewish students, small group of Jewish students. Hillel wasn't that much help, to be honest. But this group of students, by the way, because the leader of the group was a Bostonian, and the leader of the group was a Gann graduate, and he happens to be Mark Baker's son. So he has a terrific heritage. Many others. I should say that my son is active on the Columbia Alumni Jewish Association and working closely with whatever to do what needs to be done. But this is what the Columbia Jewish students said. They said, we are here writing to you as Jewish students at Columbia University who are connected to our community and deeply engaged with our culture and history. We would like to speak in our own name. Now, these are the kids that are most under attack. These are the kids who have trouble crossing the campus. These are the kids who have been fighting for months already to be able to be Jews on that, horribly to be Jews on that campus. We proudly believe in the Jewish people's right to self-determination in our historic homeland as a fundamental tenet of our Jewish identity. Contrary to what many have tried to sell you, no, Judaism cannot be separated from Israel. Zionism is, simply put, the manifestation of that belief. In the last 6 months on campus have taught us anything, it is that a large and vocal population of the Columbia community does not understand the meaning of Zionism. and consequently does not understand the essence of the Jewish people. We ultimately were not surprised when a leader of the Columbia encampment said publicly and proudly that Zionists don't deserve to live, and that we're lucky that they are not just going out and murdering Zionists. We weren't even surprised when they turned their faces away in silence. This silence is familiar. We will never forget. One thing is for sure. We will not stop standing up for ourselves. We are proud to be Jews. We are proud to be Zionists. And we all need to be very proud of those students.
Thank you, Barry. Whoa, that's very loud. Thank you, Barry. We're going to take some questions now, and I just want to get the ball rolling by asking you, in your years here at CJP or being a Jewish leader, is there a concrete example of courage from the past that can help to make concrete the kind of courage that you're calling on us to have today?
You know, I don't think it was particularly. I don't think it was particularly courageous. It's partly that our community, not just me, our community has a vision, and we're proud to stand by that vision. You know, there were difficult times when we passed the resolution opposing the Iran deal. There were some people that were not wildly happy. They trusted the president. I understand that, but it seemed to me to be pretty clear, and to our board, not just me, to our board, that it was pretty clear that it was going to be a disaster. We were so right. We were so correct, and things are so bad. It was never just about the nuclear option. It was really about giving them enough money to arm and surround Israel by completely insane, crazy people with an ideology that was totally dedicated to the destruction of Israel. It's not just the bomb. As we said at the time, it's not going to be a pretty day when there are 150,000 accurate missiles in Lebanon and they're used all at the same time. Nuclear weapons are terrible, but that would not be a good day for Israel. So I think that took some courage for our board. They got flack from their friends. We got flack. But I think if you can stand by I was, lucky. I mean, we were protected by a community that's the protection for all of us, really, for the Jews in Israel, too. Michael Goodman, in his most famous speech right after the war started, he said that we are dependent on the American Jewish community, and you are dependent on us. And if we understand that it's up to us, there was a remark about having saved the soldiers and the hostages by creating a wall of fire between them and the people who were trying to kill them. We are the wall of fire, in a way, around our brothers and sisters in Israel, and they are the wall of fire ultimately around us for our protection and our survival.
Questions?
The core claim made on campuses against Israel is that the Jews are not indigenous to Israel. That's how they claim that the Jews are colonialists. It seems that our community has not really leaned in on dispelling that. They're completely unwilling to look at the genomic evidence and the other things. They'll just do the archaeology, which is things that can be denied. Do you think we really haven't? Do you think there's more we could do to immunize Jewish students against the colonialist, non-indigenous claims?
Sure. We could always do more. I think that, obviously our kids are mostly, frequently, pretty much devoid of Jewish education. But you've got large numbers of children of interfaith households who also are becoming strong parts of the Jewish community. And whether or not they're getting educated, this is really about the heart almost more than it's about the brain. You can give people all the information in the world, and they're not listening. They're listening to TikTok, and they've got an attention span of about 35 seconds. So for the Jewish students, to protect them, as I said before, they need an infusion of courage from our Israeli brothers and sisters. When they meet them, they need to understand why Israelis vote the way they vote. They need to understand why Israelis fight the way they fight. They need to understand why they changed after the Second Intifada and why things are changing again after this and so on. But that requires identification. It requires touching For me, that's going to be more. Of course, we can tell them the true story, but try to tell them the true story of, what happened at Camp David and why that failed. We'll say, that they just turned from speaking to murder in the Second Intifada. They'll say, well, Arafat wasn't treated well. What do you call it? The Israeli leadership they kept building their settlements. There's all kinds of things, but whether it's getting non-Jewish kids to Israel to see things on the ground and to experience it directly from Israelis, or our own kids, and there are lots of programs that do that. In my mind, those are the most powerful. We ought to be, every Jewish kid ought to be going to day school and, learning everything that he possibly can. That's up to you. But more education is good, but this is about the habits of the heart.
Question? Another question? Do we have a hand? Anybody else want to ask a question? Particularly if there are any young people.
No, you got to ask questions.
Okay, we got one, and then the last question that we're going to have is for any of the young people in the room.
Hi.
Hi.
I think we all agree that Israelis are very brave and need our support. I don't think any of us would argue with that. But I kind of take exception to characterizing the students and the young people as kind of the flip side of that, as being weak and not courageous, and not willing to stand up. Because I think that what a lot of them are feeling, in my experience, is a great ambivalence and sometimes a profound disagreement with Israel. And I don't think that they're necessarily showing lack of courage or even lack of love of Israel, but a lot of ambivalence about what is going on. And I realize that that is a big chasm there, because Israelis are fighting for what they feel is their existence. And that's hard for American students to understand because they've never had to fight for their existence. But I just hesitate to characterize them as weak, because I think that many of them just are profoundly ambivalent about the situation. And I don't know what can be done about that, but I don't think it's weak.
Yeah. Look, I don't, people say that the problem is that the American Jewish community won't bear dissent and that they feel trapped. I know that's not the case. You go through the blogs that I wrote all the time that I was at CJP. We opposed the expelling the asylum seekers. We publicly opposed what the Hilltop Youth were doing in attacking Arabs. We all of that kind of stuff. Nothing wrong with being critical of Israel. What's wrong is wanting Israel gone and all the Jews there dead. That's not a lack of heart. That's a lack of historical understanding, and may I be so bold as to say brains. I mean, it's allying yourself. It's okay to be caring about the Palestinians, about the deaths and all the rest of that. But when you ally yourself, as a lot of other students, those people they're putting up not Palestinian flags, they're putting up Hamas flags. What is that? So yeah, they need. Yes, of course we have to not just understand. The Israelis are fighting with each other for good reason all the time. But it's like I said in the little talk. It's like we want to be able to talk to each other and not be trying to kill each other. That's when things go badly awry.
We have time for just one last question. If there's somebody in the room who has a question that we think can be sort of a final question here, Eileen Beckman, we can always count on you. Our fearless educator, taught generations of our children.
Might not like my question. I apologize in advance. So Barry, I have oodles and tons of respect for you and all the work you've done over the years, but one thing that I've heard you consistently say is that all kids should go to day school. And it may be in the best of all possible worlds, that's the truth. And I think sometimes that approach has sort of been at the expense of most of the kids in our community who don't go to day school, who go to our religious schools. And so my question to you is, what suggestions might you have from a leadership position or for leaders in the community that can be supportive of those kids, the religious school kids, and what kind of Israel education or support for Israel that you can help us inculcate in our kids in those kinds of
Oh
settings?
yeah, I think there's lots of ways. I mean, look, I would be a little. I think after seeing some of the declarations of the Mass Teachers Association, I'd be a little worried about putting my kids in their hands. But because it's not just what they're teaching in the curriculum, it's their attitudes, which are very connected to all of the whole modern intellectual academic, postmodernism, intersectionality, all that stuff. But public schools have been good to generations of Jews, and they're certainly a good option. But it's going to cost you more. It's going to take more thought, because that means you've got to give up some summers so your kids can go to intensive Jewish summer camp. You have to give up some vacations to like take them to Israel with you. You have to introduce them to your relatives and to everybody else, and Israel. Israel education is okay, but if Israel education is what you do in schools, there's only one way to make Israel boring, and that's probably Israel education. No offense, but it's not going to carry the day. It's fine once they've been to Israel. It's terrific. Then you can deepen the experience. And Jewish education, as you know, we were very much committed to adult learning. But adult learning is not going to carry the day until you have a direct experience of empathy with your brothers and sisters. Then you have a reason to learn all about the history of Zionism, because you care about it. It's the same. It's a big dilemma for the American Jewish community, because in a way, for all my professional life, number one priority was Jewish education. I think some of you know that. However, I've discovered, because of what I learned through Birthright, that actually, if you don't love the Jewish people, and you're interested in something spiritual, which is unlikely anyway, but for most young people, but if you are, why wouldn't you take a course in the Bhagavad Gita instead of the Hebrew Bible, or take a course in the Christian Gospels, or the sayings of Buddha? And by the way, all of that's worthwhile, and kids should take and do that stuff too. But why you would make a special commitment to learn Jewish stuff if you don't have some emotional love of the Jewish people? I don't know. So which comes first? I think we've got to do all those things at the same time. But right now, we really got to focus on getting kids to Israel. We just really have to emphasize that, and then we can do a lot of other stuff.
Barry, I'm going to take the last question. First of all, I just want to thank you. I just love your words about the love of the Jewish people and the power of personal experience and the power of being in Israel. I think it's also really important. I want to ask you to close by talking about, I think you haven't talked about yet, which is your neshama, my neshama, our neshama. And here's the question how I want to phrase it. It just feels like this has been the worst year for the Jewish people in a very, very long time. And here in America, the article by Foyer and Tablet about is the American golden age over. He begins by talking about the public schools in Oakland, where, by the way, my kids live. And it's just like anti-Zionism, anti-Semitism, anti-Israel, anti-Judaism is raging in Oakland, where my kids live. And here we have the MFA, the Mass Teachers Association, et cetera, MTA. So there's that, and then there's the, Danny Gordis talked in his column this week about the strategic quagmire, like the safety of the 4 hostages, thank God, and we still have a strategic quagmire. We don't know how this ends, when it ends, where it ends, or what it will look like. And just the constant conflict, the exhibit at the library, the constant, that we no sooner save the 4 hostages than Washington, D.C., there's that mass rally around the White House. How do you handle all that friction? How do you handle all that conflict? How do we engage it without surrendering to darkness and depression? How do you keep your neshama healthy in this season of fear and friction?
That's so easy that even my Balagala could answer it. No, it's a great story, but do you know it? I'll ask me later. So I think that's a good question, but I also think that everybody reacts in their own way. I think that I think that we underplay the gifts that we get from God. I think everything that I've ever succeeded at had nothing to do with me. It had to do with like following a path. And Viktor Frankl, in Man's Search for Meaning, basically, actually coming out of his experience in the concentration camps, says that it's the fight that counts. It's your willingness to fight against. It's your reaction to the horrible things that are happening. So I don't think not everybody needs to be super strong, but we all need to believe that and get courage from the fact that we're engaged in an important fight, not just for Jews, for civilization. If these guys win out, it's sort of like it's the end of a lot of important things. So like always, we're right between civilizations. We're the ones that are caught, but this time, at least we have an army and we're doing our best. People at the beginning, they said, Barry, it seems like even if we go in and do what we need to do and all that, we're going to lose. And what do you think? You think we're going to lose? You think we're going to win? I said, I have no idea. I have faith in the IDF. I believe that we can win, but I believe it almost doesn't matter. We can't. Some people would say it's better to die on your feet than to live on your knees. I mean, this is our hope, the state of Israel. It's what it is. We'll stand by them for as long as we can, and they'll fight for as long as they can, and we'll fight for as long as we can to be sure that America is a decent society and all the rest of that. So the way you do it is to look, hey, you always you can always turn off your radio and, not listen to, I'm like listening to the Times of Israel, 55 minutes out of every hour. But it's like we do our best to behave, to not be humiliated, to behave with courage. If I have 3 minutes, I'll tell a story.
Great.
But first, let me just say, the reason this community survives as a community is in part because of your leadership. I mean, it takes people of courage and vision to be able to, you've seen synagogues die in this city. It was because they were mismanaged and committed spiritual suicide. And this place thrives because of you guys and because of the board and the leadership and all of those great things. Now my story. So my late father-in-law, Henry Kranz, was a loyal Viennese, born in 1895. And when the First World War broke out, he was a loyal Viennese, a faithful follower of Franz Joseph, who was not an enemy of the Jews. And so he signed up at age 16, or earlier than he could have. They sent him to the Russian front, where he was captured and lived out the war in Siberia, in a Russian prisoner of war camp. Not a pretty eventuality. Gets out when they made a separate peace, comes back to the University of Vienna. Maybe he thought that he'd be like kind of a hero, a war hero. But guess what? The campus was dominated by anti-Semitic Prussian officer corps dueling fraternities. And side story, I don't know whether you've seen Leopoldstadt, the play. I highly recommend it. It's great. And in the play, there are lots of these young people around, and one of them ends up having an affair with a woman in the Jewish family. That you see their destruction. They refuse to go to Israel. They live in Vienna, in Austria, and one by one, they're all killed off in the Holocaust. But in between, this woman has an affair with this student, and the husband goes and challenges him to a duel of honor. And the student says, "I'd love to kill you, Jew, but you know what? It's in the rules of our fraternity." I checked it out. It was in the rules of the nationalist dueling fraternities in Austria and Germany. And the rule was that you are forbidden to fight a fight of honor with a Jew because Jews have no honor. Jews are incapable of honor. They are subhuman and incapable of honor. In a way, it's like our students when they want to fight back and they're told, "You're privileged. Sorry, your words don't mean anything because you're white privilege and you can't even argue for your people." But in those days, it was serious. He was told that he was subhuman and not capable of honor. Now, when Henry heard this, I think he was pissed off. He had just come back from the war. He had lived in a Russian prisoner of war camp. And so what he did was he found a bunch of other Jews who had already formed a Zionist dueling fraternity. So he joined a Zionist dueling fraternity. He had duels with those other students. He had saber scars on his face, which was a mark of honor. And the best part is that when he passed away when my wife was 11, so I never knew him. But when we became engaged, my mother-in-law gave me this ring, which is his fraternity ring. And of course, a very proud possession. But in a way, it's kind of a lesson that we must not allow ourselves to be humiliated. We must be willing to. Well, you can live a life of humiliation and shame and just slink off into nowhere, or you can do our best to stand up and. Well, it's not without risks. I mean, people, but it's like I said to this other guy. It's like, tell the kids who are like afraid to be yelled at on campus that there are guys that are actually being shot at. And we need to understand where the world is. I so appreciate your questions and being here with you, Rabbi.
Thank you, sir. Barry, thank you for sharing your insights with us. We're so grateful for your leadership of our community. What now? So first of all, I want to thank Barry Bergman for pulling us all together tonight. Barry, if you'll stand up. While we are here gathered, everything that is about to happen through all of Shavuot is thanks to Barry, and we're deeply grateful to you. If you would